The cosmic visitor will arrive soon. However, how did the experts find the comet in the first place? What amazing things will be happening on the horizon in the upcoming weeks? When should we pay special attention to the sky? Comet C2023-A3. Chan Atlas has left its home in the Oort Cloud and is headed toward the Sun. As part of this, it will also make itself known to us in October, and we will likely even be able to marvel at the tail star with the naked eye. This is a unique event that no space fan should miss. Comets, asteroids, and meteorites. Despite the fact that these terminologies are fundamental to astronomy, it is unclear how each of these cosmic flying objects differs from the others. In the end, asteroids are celestial bodies that have formed in a similar orbit to ours, similar to comets. In contrast, meteoroids with AD are objects in orbit around the Sun that are smaller than asteroids and larger than interplanetary dust. As soon as meteoroids enter the Earth's atmosphere, they interact with the air particles to produce a luminous phenomenon that is then called a meteor or shooting star. If the meteoroid does not burn up completely and reach the Earth's surface, experts refer to it as a meteorite. Asteroids represent the planets eventually formed from these so-called planetesimals, which are remnants of the early solar system when the original dust merged into objects ranging in size from meters to kilograms. However, not all of these structures eventually followed a planetary path. The remainder continued to orbit the Sun today as asteroids and comets. While asteroids consist of solid materials such as rock and metal, most of them are located in the so-called asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. However, as these celestial bodies contain little or no volatile substances, they do not form a tail, unlike comets, which makes them practically invisible to the naked eye. However, at greater distances from the Sun in the Kuiper belt or in the Oort Cloud, the planetesimals could also contain volatile compounds such as ice and frozen gases. These gave rise to comets, which are sometimes referred to as dirty snowballs, and as soon as a comet leaves its freezing cold home and advances into warmer climes, the interaction between the solar wind and the comet forms a shell-like nebulous envelope called a coma in detail. This is created by the sublimation, or in other words, the immediate transition of a solid substance into the gaseous state of aggregation of highly volatile substances that entrain dust particles trapped in the ice ultimately. The components of the coma are blown away by the radiation pressure and the solar wind, giving the celestial body its unmistakable tail. And although such a comet's tail can sometimes be 100 million kilometers long, most comets are invisible to the naked. Earthly eye. One exception to this is Halley's Comet, which has been known to mankind for centuries, and which on average approaches Earth every 3 years. The last time Halley's Comet came close to Earth was in 1986, and scientists have calculated that it will not be visible again until 2061. Fortunately, however, the visit of another comet is imminent, and anyone who looks up at the sky early, in the morning in the first few days of October, will be rewarded with a sight that they will probably never forget. For the rest of their lives, the comet of the century, we have only known since January 9th, 2023, that we are about to receive a unique visit. This is when the comet was discovered on images taken by a telescope at the Purple Mountain Observatory in Shui, China, initially classified as a potentially near asteroid. The ANAL is of the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. Oort Atlas for short, revealed that the object had in fact formed a coma, and typical of a comet, the comet was then recognized as such and given its combined, albeit somewhat unwieldy name, C2023-A3 Suchin Chan Atlas, and it was immediately suspected of soon giving us a rare spectacle in the sky. Shortly after the comet was discovered, experts expected it to reach a brightness of 3 mags. A quick explanation. A celestial body's apparent brightness is measured in magnitude, or mag for short, and the lower the mag value, the brighter the object appears to us. Although the comet's brightness was initially estimated to be 3 mag, experts now think it may eventually even drop to -3 mag because of the luminous guest from the Oort Cloud is sometimes touted as a potential comet of the century. But ultimately, only time will tell whether really lives up to this title. In fact, the brightness of the celestial body simply cannot be predicted with absolute certainty. It depends heavily on its activities in the coming weeks. However, most researchers, agree that it will be visible to the naked eye, and with a bit of luck it could even outshine comet C220 F3 Neowise, which could also be seen without technical aids in the summer of 2020. Will the comet break apart before it arrives? However, it should be noted at this point that the brilliant spectacle may be over before it has even begun. In this regard, the Czech-American astronomer Denks Sanina has stated that the comet will probably disintegrate before it has even reached its closest point to the Sun. However, this gloomy prediction is anything but uncontroversial among experts. Other astronomers criticize Sanina for ignoring the so-called phase angle of the comet in his article, and thus a decisive factor. As a result, the majority of experts still believe that the object will survive its approach to the Sun and form a breathtaking tail that can be seen from afar, as the object has never before reached such close proximity to the Sun. It is likely to still have a lot of ice in its core. This will evaporate on its journey through space, possibly making the comet appear particularly bright and large at the same time. However, it is precisely this large amount of ice that poses the greatest danger to the celestial body. According to Sanina, this means that the ice could make the comet unstable and ultimately cause it to break apart. Well, we will soon know which scenario really happens, but in principle, a comet appears brightest to us when it is close to the Earth and the Sun at the same time. In the case of the rare gas from the Oort Cloud, calculations have shown that it will reach its closest point to the Sun, known as perihelion, on September 27, 2024. At this point, it will be just under 60 million kilometers away from our host star, roughly the distance between Mercury and the Sun. Nevertheless, comet hunters in our latitudes will still have to be patient, as the object is located below the ecliptic, or in other words, the planetary plane. It will initially only be visible in the southern hemisphere, when you should keep an eye on the sky. The comet will not appear in the sky over Germany until the beginning of October, and if you want to admire it for yourself, you should definitely set an alarm clock and look to the east early in the morning before sunrise, where its impressive tail will adorn the comet. Is predicted to rise at 6:01 on October 1st. But it will be very difficult to see the comet nucleus so close to the horizon. If the tail lives up to its astronomical expectations, it will be visible in the morning twilight. In the days that follow, the comet will rise a few minutes later each day until it eventually vanishes entirely from our field of view for a few days until about October 10th. After that, though, we will witness a comet comeback, which is quite remarkable, but it will appear in the evening, fall low in the west sky, where its sharply rising tail will once more adorn. The comet will set on October 10th, 1913, around 40 minutes after the Sun sets. At the same time, the celestial body will also approach its closest point, proximity to Earth, a little later, the so-called pare, on October 12th. The distance between us and the comet will be a cosmic stone's throw of just 70 million km. As a result, the object will also reach its greatest brightness of up to -3 mag. It would then be almost as bright as Venus, and significantly brighter than any star after October 12th. However, it will already be time for the comet to gradually fade away. But at least, observing it will be a little easier at first, because while the Sun sets earlier and earlier, the comet sinks about 20 minutes later every evening, according to current calculations. However, it will no longer be visible to the naked eye in November, even under the best conditions. Either way, the experts recommend taking a good pair of binoculars with you when looking at the comet. This is because the frequent layers of haze near the horizon can quickly turn out to be an unwelcome nuisance. In addition, the comet will be easier to see in southern Germany than in the north, both during its early morning phase and when it appears in the evening sky, well, as long as it develops normally, of course, because if the comet does break up or parts of its nucleus are lost, the spectacle of light on the horizon could end abruptly. Excluding this eventuality, the comet will have moved 290 million kilometers away from Earth by the end of November in order to set course for the edge of the solar system in the next 20 years, and will not return to us for another 26,000 years. And if you want to return to our channel much earlier, you should definitely click on the subscribe button now, become part of our community, and never miss an exciting video from us again. We'll see you soon.